So now we're into chapter 5, and chapter 5 is entitled Unbelievers Are Not Neutral and Christians Shouldn't Be. So now we'll talk about what to do when you encounter different worldviews of unbelieving professors, fellow students, friends, family members, strangers, or the people that you work with. So pretty much everyone that you're ever going to encounter out in the world.
And so as you mentioned, we, as Bonson tells us, we all have a worldview, an underlying set of presuppositions about the nature of God and man, the world, and how we know what we know, epistemology, how we're supposed to live our lives, ethics, right, and so on. And by that worldview, then we evaluate, Bonson tells us, everything else, right? And so, he says that we're going to enter into a discussion with someone who has his own worldview. And so with his own underlying presuppositions, his own way of evaluating facts, and his own ideas about how he knows what he knows and how he's supposed to live his life. And in such conversations, he tells us, we have one worldview, ours, in conflict with another worldview, theirs, right? So now what do we do?
Right, exactly. So the temptation when that problem arises is that there's a temptation that Christians have been given into for hundreds of years that has an initial plausibility. It is to think, well, then everyone has to be neutral. Let's everyone pull all aside our presuppositions. You put aside yours, I'll put aside mine. I'll put my Bible down. You put nothing down as the atheist, and we'll just look at things from scratch. We'll build up. It's the Descartesian model of let's empty our minds of everything except for our doubt. There's the I that's in the center, and let's build out from there. So we won't have any prejudices or any assumptions. We'll just be neutral. And then you say your first word, and then it's in English, and all these emotions and historicity of language comes flooding in, and oh boy, it seems like it's not possible to be neutral. Well, before we talk about the encounter with the unbeliever, we must deal with this question of neutrality, and can anyone truly be neutral?
Right. And Bonson is really upfront with this, right? He says there are two propositions about neutrality that a person needs to remember when the unbeliever tries to press neutrality on you, right? Because again, as he mentioned, the temptation is to say, well, we're all, coming from our own worldview, so we have this conflict. Why don't we just be neutral and kind of get rid of all of our worldviews and just kind of, have a neutral stance? And he says, this is what we need to be to remember when we are tempted to do this or say this or think like this. First, the unbelievers are not neutral. And second, we shouldn't be neutral, right? And so he's going to kind of pursue those ideas here in the first part of this chapter.
Mm-hmm. So in the heading titled "No one is neutral," he states just that no one is neutral, not even the person who claims to be neutral, and that's the first point. And so think about it when it comes to that statement. Okay, we seem to be at odds in our discussion of whatever it might be. Let's come up with some initial starting points. Let's be neutral. Well, even from that starting point, there's an underlying assumption that neutrality is a good thing to be. And so we're already bringing presuppositions and worldview claims into it by saying it's good to be neutral, or it's possible to be neutral.
It's possible. Yeah. Right. So those are two assumptions right there. It's possible and it's good.
Right.
And so we're bringing those in. Yeah.
I always think of small town representations in government, and so you have all these rules that say, we believe in democracy, and we have these rules for how speaking is to take place, and so we need to follow these rules. Well, okay, who's draconianly putting the rules in there, or who's saying let's vote on all these things and whether or not they should, and even saying let's vote on this already smuggles in, this is the best way to do things.
To make
or
a decision.
it has somebody who's leading that charge. There's no collective, a Wrinkle in Time type brain of just saying, we are the Borg and democracy is how we're going to go about here, because that defeats the whole purpose of that. So
you can't defeat the Borg.
Right. So even at the beginning of democracy, it already fails by having one ruler there. So he goes on to say, imagine what it would be like to study the American colonies for an entirely neutral point of view. We want to know what it was like in colonial America. And since we are completely neutral, we don't have any idea of what's important or what's not important. Do we look at taxes or do we look at grain production? Do we care about freedom? And so we should look at the documents written, or do we care about monarchy? And so we look at the history of monarchicism as it goes throughout the world in different time points and how they faced rebellion. So how do we know what even to look at? Where do we start? How do we make determinations? What causes this and what causes that? We have no notion of responsibility when we're coming from a neutral standpoint. Okay, well, this one battle happens and this is what kicks it off. Well, do we just look at things in a rebellion as only war and battles, or do we say the hearts and minds of the people have to be one as well, until all of a sudden you're in 1778 and all of a sudden you're free and you're forming a government that's never been formed in this way before? Well, you're going to be missing a lot of points here. And so to have a neutral standpoint, you're not able to make these claims. In fact, the newest history, this revisionist history that's come about with the positive aspects of Amazon or different schools coming into light with the internet is, why didn't they teach me this in school? Well, because this in school had one narrow point of view to try and capture, even if you took out all the bad qualities, they're trying to give you a big swath of what was important. They try to hit it every year so that you kind of remember it and you think, okay, there's Bunker Hill, even though Bunker Hill is actually Breed's Hill, but we're not going to go into that because everyone kind of colloquially knew it as a Bunker Hill. And so then you get to a point where you're like, oh, wait, everything I was told was wrong. And I need to read more books on top of it because they're coming not with a neutral point of view. Even if they really try, they're not able to get there. And so these revisionist histories have come in and said, there might be other avenues that we haven't looked at before that might explain better or might give you a better picture of what's even going around. And that's just history. That's not even making moral claims. That's just how we looked at what happened and why in the past.
Yeah. And so Bonson's point is that choices must be made, right? And you can't make choices without some standard, right? What is important when we're looking at history? What's the important things that we need to consider? Well, you're going to have to make some choices because, how many grains are, how much grain was produced and all that. You have to make choices is the point he's making, right? And in order to do that, you have to have a standard. When you apply that standard, you're indicating that you don't have a completely open-minded approach to the subject. You're discriminating between various things that are happening. You're deciding that one thing is good or bad or more important or less important than something else, right? So the point here is you cannot be neutral. That's what he's trying to get at here.